We have a guest joining us in studio this hour, and we haven't seen him in, gosh, I think well over a month, but he's been a busy guy because not only is he talking a little bit about the outdoors, he's been outdoors quite a bit in the last week. Not that he doesn't do that anyway, but he's been out doing some hunting, and we've got a lot of people who are out there doing that right now. First of all, we want to welcome Kelton Hatch back to our studio on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you on Top Story, 7 minutes after 9 o'clock, and we're at 45. We have some breaks of sunshine outside, which is nice. First of all, good to see you, but I knew that you wouldn't be skipping out on hunting season.
Heavens, no. I mean, this weekend was like Christmas. I mean, you had waterfowl and you had pheasant and you had deer hunting, first opening weekend of deer hunting, and most all our elk hunts opened this weekend, the controlled elk hunts. And so, no, there's a lot of folks in the woods right now.
And of course, you're going to be talking a little bit about safety today, which is,
Oh, it's always an issue. With this, we had some officers that had to hike up into the Smoky Bennett zone. A guy was cleaning his deer and drove his knife into his quad,
ah,
and it was close enough to the femoral artery that they decided they'd better life flight him out. And it was a pretty tough situation because it was, he's in there a couple miles and he's on a knife. He had it's called a gut hook knife, and so the blade, and so on the end of it, it's got a big like fishing hook on the backside of it, because that way you can hook it onto the hide and slit the hide really easy. It just hooks and pulls. Well, it also sticks in a person's leg really good when
yeah.
it gets beyond the gut hook into the leg, and so it is a pretty tough situation. So it's just, one of those things people really need to watch what they're doing, not get excited, just kind of relax when you're doing things and get things done safely.
It is. Is it? I think you mentioned this. Today, are we at least a little bit better off because aren't most people carrying like a cell phone with them or something like that when they're out there?
And that's the only thing that helped this guy. He was close enough on the front range. I mean, if he'd been another mile deeper in there, he wouldn't have had any cell coverage. And so, he was fortunate. He was close enough on the front range that he was able to get cell service. But no, I mean that's a major issue. I know that satellite communications devices, Delorme, Spot, um, the Delorme InReach, the Spot system by Garmin, and Garmin just purchased Delorme, and they've got some satellite, and then you're starting to see more people carrying sat phones where they can actually make phone calls from the backcountry instead of just text or send messages, I need help, and things like this. But those are handy little devices because um, I've got a lot of friends that carry them, and I'm debating on breaking down and getting one because the older I get, the you just kind of start doubting some of your ability to hike out 40 miles
Yes.
sometimes, and so and but with those you can send a message and it sends a GPS location where you're at, and so there's a lot of things like that. But I think the biggest thing you have to do is just really take your brain and then be really careful. Accidents still happen. I'm not saying what happened to this gentleman was anything. It was an accident, and it could happen to anybody. But you just have to really be cognizant of what you're doing, especially with weather conditions the way they're turning. I mean, we got close to a foot of snow, um, up in the Trinities. Most of all the country over there in Stanley Basin, 6 inches to a foot. Typically, we get snow this early. Not all of it's going to stick. Sometimes it'll melt right down, and then it's just a big mud hole. But Saturday when we was up there, everybody was stuck. They'd blocked off some roads. Um, Snow came in. People weren't prepared. Didn't have their chains. Didn't have their shovels. And so it's really good when you're heading out just to take those type of things with you, so that you know, you need to always pack as if you're going to spend the night. I never have wanted to spend the night when I'm out elk hunting unless it's back at the tent with the sleeping bag. But in my life, I've spent the night out on bear hunts, elk hunts, and a couple of deer hunts. When things go haywire and you can't get back to camp, um, get an animal down, gets dark, you know, and so you just need to have your stuff so you can spend the night.
You've got a list of rules people need to follow as well when it comes to check stations.
Well, working the check stations, I was going to talk a little bit about our harvest success this weekend because everybody was out working check stations this weekend, and these things that these rules are some of the things that we saw in violation at the check station. So I just wanted folks to um, kind of be aware of that. But I'll do the fun stuff first. Harvest success is down a little bit from last year, but what I'm attributing it to is we've been open for, I mean, season opened last Monday on our general deer hunts. Um, at the Timmerman check station was a little over 26%, almost 27% harvest success, um, which is only down about 2% over last year. But uh, so we had some good harvests this year in that area. We actually checked more hunters this weekend than we did last year. We checked 458 hunters at that check station, whereas last year we checked 426. Littlewood was down. Also, we checked 271 hunters coming out of the Littlewood versus 178 last year. But the harvest success in that area was down to around 12, 13%, and then it was around 20 last year. And so I really attribute a lot of that to that heavy weather that we had come in there this weekend. A lot of rain. It rained all night, Friday night into Saturday and Sunday, and so it is pretty sloppy up there. People are seeing a lot of deer. I work the Mountain Home Check Station. We haven't got the stats completed on there. I kind of tallied them up the first night. We checked 84 deer that first night, and I was at a feeling that would be close to around 30% harvest success. But getting here, I didn't get all the numbers all figured out, and so on that. But it looks like things went pretty good for the opening weekend of the season. But the things that we ran into problems with, and I just wanted to talk to sportsmen about, just everybody's out there to have fun, and these are just a few little pointers so that just to refresh in your memory. You need to leave evidence of sex naturally attached to the carcass. So, like uh, if you have a general tag, you can either leave the head on the animal, which is really hard sometimes too when you're packing them out of the back country, or you have to leave part of their anatomy on there so that you can tell whether it's a buck or a doe. Um, just be aware of private property. We've had some incidences where people are driving down the road, they see a nice deer standing off the edge of the road, they get too excited, they jump out, they shoot, and then they see the orange sign, and it's no trespassing. No trespassing violation like that, or if it's in a cultivated field, that means mandatory loss of license for 1 year. And so just be cognizant of that. The big one is tagging properly. You're issued a deer permit. There's little triangles on that deer permit. You have to cut that triangle out entirely. Everybody goes, well, why? I cut it with my knife. I split. Well, that's a poacher's dream. A slit tag is where they just make one little slice through the date, and yes, it's marked. However, it's very easily covered. We've caught this in the field where people will slit the tag. They'll go home. They'll put a little bit of glue on it. It dries. Then they'll get some blood, and they'll just you put a dab of blood over that little slit that's been glued back together, and you tap it with your fingers. Nobody really notices unless you know what to look for. We do write slit tags. It's a $72 violation, so we just want people to make sure that when you're validating your tag, it shows in the regulations how to validate that correctly. And then we had a couple short stoppers this year where they stop and then they validate their tag on the way out. Not a good thing either. You need to get that validated. And then the final thing I was just going to talk about is recovery. We've had some wounding loss up there. We've had other sportsmen that have found it. You know, I understand that sometimes people will try to harvest an animal, they don't get the best shot on it, and then they'll lose it. But we do need to put a concerted effort, and that's more than just walking over to the area. I mean, that may take 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours or longer to search an area after taking a shot to make sure that that animal wasn't wounded and just lost.
I had a friend years ago. He was telling me that he went out hunting with a buddy of his, and he said going to start at 6 a.m. And his buddy showed up at 10 a.m.
Mhm.
And he said, I could smell alcohol and cigarettes on him. He said, and you can't really go out and track any animals with those odors. He said, so they went out and they split apart in a swamp. And he said, all of a sudden you heard a crack of the shot. His buddy had fallen asleep, but he woke up with a deer standing right over him, even though he smelled like tobacco and alcohol. Shot the thing, and then he said it ran about 100 feet, tried to leap a hedgerow, and died atop the hedgerow. Was just hanging over it. So some people with really bad habits, obviously, can still be out there, but they shouldn't be in that condition, obviously, when they're out there.
That's always a concern, alcohol and firearms don't mix well, but we didn't see any of that this weekend, and we checked several hundred hunters, and for the most part, everybody was out having a good time, and we have a great set of sportsmen in Idaho, and we're very fortunate to have that, and so these little things that we talked about, there wasn't a ton of it, but those are just a few things that came to mind that we wanted to kind of touch on. But no, I've had a lot of friends that have those habits that are pretty successful hunters too. But I don't know. I'm surprised the deer was standing over him, but maybe it was just going, "What is this? I've never been around this before."
This really stinks.
Yeah.
Well, we want to point out for folks who'd like to talk to Kelton this morning, we have a break coming up in a moment, but you can reach him at 736-0300. That's 736-0300. It's 918. And Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Right now it's 44, and we're going to talk a little bit about birding in the next segment too.
Well, not birding, bird shooting.
Bird shooting. There you go. Not watching them.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I like looking at birds, but I guess I don't go out and just look at birds.
Yeah, that's the Audubon Society.
Yeah.
I think that's a different organization than Fish and Game. So we'll have more on that coming up in a moment. Could we quickly, for people, we've got about 30 seconds, who'd like to know a little bit more about some of the rules and regulations, they're posted at the website, right?
They are. We've got them at fishandgame.idaho.gov, and that's and spelled out on Fish and Game. We also have regulations at all our sporting goods stores that sell hunting and fishing licenses. So if you have any questions, I know it's a novel to read. It's 100 pages. However, if it's something you love doing, you need to get familiar with those, and it just makes things funner and when you're out there, because then you're not concerned what's going on, and so
you keep everybody else safe that way too.
It does, and so, but I'm anticipating a great hunting year.
So far, we're off to a good start. We've got more with Kelton Hatch on the way, coming up in just a few minutes. Kelton Hatch in studio with us, joining us on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story. And if you've got a question or comment about fish and game issues this morning, 736-0300, 736-0300. Quick mention, coming up on Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, we'll be joined in studio by one of the medical professionals from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls. And they'll be taking your telephone calls as well. If you have a question or comment related to health issues, you can do that. Also, a note, they're still looking for new patients at Dr. Tripp's office. And you can actually, if you're a patient, sometimes see him on the very same day. If you wake up and you're not feeling well in the morning, they'll squeeze you in often during the course of a day at the office, located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office in Twin Falls. Kelton, we've got a caller with us.
Well, great. I figured we'd have a bunch of questions or comments or stories at least. At least we want to hear a couple hunt stories today.
You're on the air. Go ahead.
Good morning, guys. I love it when Kelton's on there. He's always fun to listen to, and I get to lie to him occasionally. We were up the opening day behind Mackey in Unit 50 for deer, and it was just gorgeous. We've seen a lot of moose, a lot of antelope, and all the deer we've seen were down by the farm, but that's okay. We had a great time. But back to that evidence of sex, I've been married to the same gal for 41 years, so there ain't happening, guys. Thanks.
I knew as soon as I brought that up on the paper, you or somebody else would call in.
We wanted to point out, we were talking a little bit about birds, mentioning that was going to be a subject as well. uh, pheasants. And I've seen them running, and when they're running, they're quick. They're even quicker when they're flying. This is not an easy bird to bring down.
No, and it was opening weekend for them this weekend. We had a lot of folks who were out. Numbers are looking fairly good. A lot of mixed reports on people's success, and so. But it's a fun time of year, and they're really good table fare. But you're right; they're one of the biggest birds that we have in Idaho, next to the sage grouse. So it does take a pretty good placement of your shot to bring them down and stuff like that. One thing I wanted to mention on pheasant hunting, we do have release pheasants down at the Niagara Springs Wildlife Management Area. And if a person's interested in going down there, it's $23.75 for the WMA permit. The rest of the state is a 3-bird limit each day. Um, However, on the WMA, it's a 2-bird limit, and you can harvest up to 6 birds on that permit and then buy another one. And so it just gives people another option or a place to hunt. That's one of our biggest complaints or biggest trials that we have with a lot of pheasant hunting and quail hunting and stuff, is just finding places to be able to hunt.
A lot of people, especially this time of year, want to put a bird away in the freezer for Thanksgiving,
You bet.
and pheasant is great on the table.
Oh, it is, and and we've really been enjoying some upland game, some rough grouse, and some huns and some chuckers this early fall, and it's really good table fare. My wife does have a tendency to not like biting into shot. And so, yeah, if you haven't done a lot of bird hunting, just make sure, guys, when you or ladies, when you come back, you thoroughly clean that meat out, because some it's never bothered me to get a little piece of shot. It's
It's
just
like when you're eating a mushroom and you get a piece of dirt.
yeah, it's like,
It's
yeah, I don't know, I love game birds, and so, and I like hunting them, and so, but. Any of this wild game is delicious for the table. It's just one of the keys is just learning how to cook it and take care of it and things like that. And there's a lot of books out and ideas and articles. You can go online and Google and come up with 100 different venison recipes, and or sage grouse or pheasant or salmon or fish or whatever you're looking for. And so, it's a good place to start.
That's kind of the whole point of Thanksgiving, though, is to have a little bit of that variety, isn't it?
It is. It is. Give thanks for what you have. And so, no, it's always good to have some. We always have some type of wild game on the table.
And also, we wanted to mention you've got waterfowl as well.
Waterfowl opener. That's one thing. I'm not a huge waterfowl hunter myself. However, I've got a lot of friends that are die hard,
Takes some
and
patience.
it does. And I am so ADD. I have a rough time setting in the blind. But they just had tremendous shoots this weekend with this weather. A lot of local ducks this year. We had a really good hatch. And with this cold weather up north, we're anticipating a good push of waterfowl into the area. So it's like I said, we're at a smorgasbord of the year, right now, because you've got deer, elk, uh, upland, waterfowl. Everything's pretty much open for hunting right now.
We got to point out Kelton Hatch is our studio guest, and he's here for one more half hour. You're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And if you have a comment or question for Kelton in the next half hour, be sure to give us a call at 736-0300. In the meantime, short break on the way, but we've got plenty more just ahead here on the radio this morning. And we hope, by the way, that you keep the questions, how shall we put it, got to stop making fun of your wives when you're calling in. Our studio guest is Kelton Hatch, joining us this morning from Idaho Fish and Game, and he's here for the remainder of the hour. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And if you'd like to reach Kelton while he's in the studio with us, telephone number 736-0300. That's 736-0300. My email's back working. It was down for a little while, too, as well. So if you've got any question or comment, you couldn't call it in, you can email me as well, and I'll make sure that I check that and pass it along. We do want to mention, you got a couple of other notes here. Weather and safety reminder, and boy, you mentioned it earlier. We
Well,
had some gully washers this weekend.
well, we did, and we talked about that a little bit, but I may touch on it just a little bit more, because it is such a concerning issue this time of year. Um, when you go out take something like a survival blanket or a tarp, something to make you some shelter. You need to have, I never go anywhere without a couple headlamps or a headlamp and a flashlight just in case one of them doesn't work because 9 times out of 10, I'm coming out in the dark when you're big game hunting. And so it's nice to be able to see where you're going on these new moons and, when it's so black until 1 or 2 in the morning. Um, One of my buddies the other night, he didn't get back to, he didn't get back to camp until about 1 a.m. and he was just up on the hill hunting and bedded the animals down and then was coming out and his headlamp broke down and it just took him that much longer. And so it's good to be prepared with that. Have a couple types of lighters. Whether it's matches, waterproof matches, or cigarette lighter, or some fire starter of some type, because not only for the heat, but just kind of for company. Fire can be good company when you're out there, and take your mind off the stress of for some people being out there overnight and such. But the other big thing is we really recommend that people don't wear cotton this time of year. Cotton kills. If you can get some type of a wool or a polypro or some uh, some type of nylon, it wicks moisture. You have a good base layer underneath that wicks moisture and holds the heat in. I can wear wool and I can be soaking wet and still maintain a good body core temperature. But if I'm wearing cotton, it just freezes me to death. And so
Hmm.
just dress in layers and be prepared.
We have a caller with us. Caller, you're on the air with Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a question. Years ago, when they first came out with the harvest reporting, I didn't report and had I haven't hunted in years, and I went to get a license a couple of years back and was not able to. What what's the protocol to get that fixed so that I can get my license again?
Well, that's not an issue at this time. And usually, what happens before when you would go in to get that, they would just say, "Hey, what was your harvest report?" Take it right there on the computer, and then sell you a license. That wasn't whoever had done that. I don't. Well, that vendor, we need to talk to them so that they're not doing that because that's not our goal with the harvest report. You should be able to go to any vendor right now and purchase it. If you have any issues, come to the regional office and we'll get you one today.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Want to thank him. And again, I think we had another caller, but they'll hopefully check back
Yeah.
in with us in a few minutes.
I was going to touch on that harvest report. The reason we have a harvest report um, is we fly, we kind of get an aerial survey, we do ground comp, we understand how many animals are out there from that. Then we combined it with a mandatory harvest report for what hunters are actually taking out of there. So if we've got the number of animals that are out there, we know how many were harvested, we know our fawn survival, and we can kind of monitor or at least have a rough guesstimate whether our population is going up or down. And so that's one of our most critical tools to predict wildlife populations.
Got about a minute before the break, but we'll let someone at least squeeze a question or comment in, and then we can get back to it in the next segment. You're up next, and you're on KLIX.
Hi, I just wanted to make two quick points. I heard you mention those survival blankets and a couple of other things. Those survival blankets are wonderful, and they're really inexpensive. I think you can find them for $10 or less. And I know that the Last Stand Survival Shop in Jerome sells them. And also, speaking of the Last Stand, they're doing a class on October 25th in the evening. You can find it on the Facebook page for the Last Stand Survival Shop, and it's all about 72-hour kits, and they're doing it in conjunction with hunting packs and trying to help the uneducated or new hunters with what they should bring when they go out hunting.
Good idea. And in fact, in some of these California transplants might need that course too as well.
Well, and some of the locals, I mean, we see it from all angles, but no, that's good information to have there.
And the blanket tends to look, we called them space blankets at one time, right? That's that silver blanket.
And they're about 90. I always have one for, you can find them somewhere for 90 cents to $1.50. And if nothing else, I always have a couple of them in my bag because when I'm butchering an animal out up on the mountain, if I have nothing else to dress the animal out on. I use my survival blanket, and then I've got another one in case I need it. But it does they come in really handy for just a light piece of aluminum kind of stuff. It just holds all the moisture in.
We got more with
I
Kelton
mean all the
Hatch.
heat.
There you go. More with Kelton Hatch coming on KLIX in just a couple of minutes. Our studio guest is Kelton Hatch. He joins us from Idaho Fish and Game on a regular basis. We'll put it that way. Here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story. If you'd like to reach Kelton this morning, 736-0300 and a couple of other things you wanted to mention. But I was telling you, I think off air, that when I was going up Route 89 between Alpine and Jackson last week, I happened to see some of the burn from the summer, and a lot of logging trucks were coming out of there, so they've got a good use for some of what's left behind. But you've got a note here on a big fire as well.
Well, we did. It was a pretty tough deal over there. We have the Tex Creek Wildlife Management Area. We got several thousand deer and elk that end up wintering there, but we lost about 35,000 acres on the WMA itself, and then the fire was about 53,000 total acres. Because of that, and because of all the deer and elk that'll be moving down in there, and their concerns for survival, this has been really controversial. There's been a lot of people that are really upset. We increased the tags for an extra doe tag of 500. You can buy that over the counter, or an extra cow tag of 500. Um, and the reason being is because when you do not have any place for those animals to go, it's going to increase. It's close enough to Idaho Falls that those animals, there's a good chance, will move right into town.
Yeah.
And then you have a real high human risk of damage, property damage, or death by vehicles traveling to and from hitting those animals. 500 isn't really enough in the case of how many are over there. Eastern Idaho is so much different than Central Idaho, where we're living right now. We're in South Central. Over there, 90% of the winter range is private. They get a lot of snow, and so it's all on those front ranges right above town. And when you lose a chunk of that, there's no place for them to go. The South Hills and around here, we've got a lot of country. When we had that big fire down here, down on the South Hills, yeah, we had deer go into it. However, there's a lot of other places they could move to because we just don't have the snow depths. And we didn't have the snow depths over here that would cause mortality. They always have the snow. They always have the cold over there in eastern Idaho. I mean, where we're looking at maybe a 0 degree day, um, it's really common for 35, 40, 35 below or 30 below over there. And that really has an impact on overall wildlife health and survival. And so that's why we have the permits over there to avoid catastrophic die-off, for one, for the available habitat that's there for the animals that are left that aren't harvested. Hopefully, they have a little little better bet. I'm tongue tied today.
Yeah.
Little better ability to survive, and then so that's what we're having. So if you're looking for an extra tag, I don't know where we're at on those sales. We just had those tags go on sale this last week, and so I'm guessing they'll go fairly quick though.
And trying to keep them out of Idaho Falls. We had that situation last year where you ended up with an elk in somebody's rec room, their basement.
Oh, in their basement. And we end up, it's bad enough over in IF that we move 20 to 30 moose a winter, some years more. 2 winters ago, they were moving an average of 2 moose a week. Snow got deep, pushed them all into town, high moose density. Um, they're not too happy with the Tex Creek Wildlife Management Area. There's not a lot of habitat for them. And the elk and deer get pushed down into the edges, even off Tex Creek, when it was in good shape, when they got heavy snow.
Weather Channel was running a documentary yesterday, and of course they featured that one rescue of the moose cow where they pulled her out of the she'd fallen through the ice.
Oh yeah.
And of course that's dangerous enough to be out there trying to rescue an animal that doesn't like you in the first place.
Yeah.
But number two, when you're out there on the ice, there's always these types of things that come up, though, it seems every year.
Well, it is. We had, just last week we were up in Sun Valley. We had a moose that got tangled up in a zip line and was down, and so we had to go up and tranquilize him. He was tangled up with his antlers. We had a moose last year that was up in Sun Valley that started rubbing the velvet off his antlers on a person's flagpole, and they called and said, "There's a moose running through town with a UCLA and American flag tied to his head, antlers, because he got tangled up in that, broke their flagpole." Um, and so we have a lot of wildlife incidences in this area, and so and it's a real concern. I mean, where do you draw the line on human safety and stuff like that when you've got so many animals? A lot of people say, well, people need to just slow down and drive careful, which they do. However, when somebody dies in an animal vehicle collision, and it's somebody that then it kind of changes your view of wildlife in town and in urban settings really change quick. And that's something that we have to deal with. And so there's a lot of concern for that up in the Wood River Valley. We have a lot of concern for that right down here in Twin Falls. Falls Avenue, Highway 30, almost every one of these back streets around here, we have a lot of vehicle collisions. Fortunately, they're mule deer, so they're typically not killing people. Um, but they can cause quite a bit of injury,
I'm
even though
not
they're smaller animal.
I'm not surprised though that a moose would treat a UCLA flag that way because moose and Bruins don't normally get along.
I could see your mind when I said that. I could see the wheels turning. I can see the wheels
That
turning.
would be a sight to see, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was. No, so.
You were referencing the colder temperatures in eastern Idaho, and as far north, I guess, as I've gotten in the state is Idaho City so far, but I've seen most of eastern Idaho now, and I've seen a good part of this state. But you've referenced before how it's really like being in 3 or 4 distinct states. If somebody's out there hunting, is there one place that you'd prefer to be over all of the others?
I love that's what I love about Idaho is the diversity because if I want to go out to the desert and hang out in the desert, I can. If I want to be up at 10,000-foot peaks on snow-covered peaks, you know, grasping for oxygen as I'm climbing climbing the mountains, I just head to central Idaho. If I want to be in the low rolling foothills with some, mountains in the background and stuff, I can head over to eastern Idaho. The weather conditions are all different in all the different areas. I think it's a great place, a great opportunity for people to hunt because and live just because there's such a diversity in habitat and topography and everything. And we're pretty fortunate here in Twin Falls because we can experience any of that within just an hour or two drive or less.
We have a caller with us, and caller, you're on the air at 9:51 with Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game on KLIX. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. You've been talking about safety issues. I got a couple of things to mention. Traveling to the site, please be careful. I know a gentleman who has, this year alone, hit an elk and 2 deer, mainly traveling between here and the Chalice area. And I'm not sure if you mentioned making sure you have plenty of water with you. Even when it's cold, you need to stay really hydrated.
Very good points, both on both counts. That's the tough part when you get talking about some of the safety stuff. There's so much to remember, so I appreciate that phone call. And it's like we said, and why he brings that up that he's hit 3 different animals. Just for people to know, there is a salvage law in the state of Idaho, and so if you do hit a deer or an elk or a skunk or a coyote or a fox or whatever, you can harvest that meat or that pelt or that animal. You just have to call the regional office when we're open and tell us you have it, and go online to roadkill report and fill that out, and then you can legally take that animal home to eat it or use it.
We have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX with Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game.
Hey, I just wanted to let everybody know that those tags sold out in about 10 minutes after they went on sale last week on the 500 deer and 500 elk over there in the Texas Creek area. So they're sold out in way less than 15 minutes. I was in line unsuccessful. And then I wanted to thank Idaho Fish and Game for the counts. The a lot of good animals out there, and we're managing them correctly. And I vote that I'm for the tags because we don't want proliferation of disease, and we sure don't need to help the coyotes and the wolves and the lions and everything else proliferate instead of our game animals. So anyway, that's all I got.
Well, thanks for your call, and I appreciate. I had been out of the office so much I didn't realize that those tags had sold out that quick, but I do appreciate that. I figured they'd be gone, but I thought I'd bring it up, and I appreciate his comments.
You referenced you can take a pelt home, but you can't generally turn around and try and sell it or do anything like that, right?
No, well, you can on fur bearer pelts. You bet you can. Bighorn sheep, moose, trophy species. You cannot. You can. I mean, if you hit a mountain goat, you're driving in the wrong spot. But if you're a bighorn sheep sometimes or a moose, things like that, those are trophy species. You can render them to your position. You can take possession. You can take them home and eat them, but you cannot sell them.
We both in the past week we were talking off air. We both had a close encounter with a moose and the bull moose. In fact, in the last week.
Oh yeah.
And it's only my third experience with the moose. You probably have had many, many more. And this
Hundreds.
situation that I was in, the stubborn critter didn't want to get out of the road very fast and backed up traffic. You don't though. What's the safest thing to do in that situation?
If I'm on foot, to me, the single most dangerous animal in Idaho is a moose, bar none. Bull moose, when they're in rut, can get very aggressive. And so they just don't like anybody. Cow moose with calves are the same way, and they can get very aggressive. Just give them a wide berth if you're on foot and stay away. If I'm driving down the road and you got a moose walking down the middle of it, depending on where you're at, where you were at over in the park, they really don't like you honking at them and chasing them down the road. If I'm over here, I'm probably going to try to scare that critter off the road as far as I can, so my friend doesn't come down the road and hit it right after. And so it's kind of two different things. But just be cautious when you're out there. Moose can be very aggressive. Big, beautiful animals. I love the era of the selfie with the wildlife in the background because of how many selfies end up with the guy getting thrown in the air and their phone getting stomped. And so just be really cautious when you get around them. If you can take it with your cell phone without zooming in, you're too close.
After he got off the road, he started down a bike trail. And I started driving down the road at that point. I realized there were people coming the other direction. Once again, you just, if you see him and you're on the bicycle, turn around and go the other way.
Well, yeah. Yeah, we just had a horrible accident up in the Glacier Park area. A gentleman was riding his bike down the trail too fast through the timber, come around a corner and hit a grizzly bear. Well, he didn't win. And so, any of those wildlife, like when you're out there, if you're out moving around in the woods and there's any concern and stuff like that, be a little bit noisy if you're not hunting. And that way it'll run those critters off and different things like that.
I was going to say there's that video that's made its way around the internet of the guy actually on a mountain bike with the grizz chasing him. That's gotten a lot of airplay over the last couple of years.
You see, and I've never seen that because I would put money that the grizzly, because they can sprint at about 30 plus miles an hour, and
yeah,
I cannot ride a bike that fast.
No. Only if you're going downhill.
If I'm going downhill and got a grizzly chasing me, maybe, because that might kick me. That would be my turbo.
The
adrenaline would kick in, and so. But this is for sportsmen. This is the single best time of year. Get out, enjoy it. Take a day off, go out and have some fun. Enjoy wildlife. Take somebody you care about. Take your kid, your spouse, your significant other, whatever. Get out there, just enjoy it. It's a beautiful time of year. When can you go out in the woods and just enjoy it like this time of year?
Good point too.
It's not hot.
Want to thank you for coming by. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Hey, sounds good.
Kelton Hatch joining us from Idaho Fish and Game this morning on KLIX. Bill Colley with you as well. And God willing, if the creek don't rise, I'll get to come back and do this all over again tomorrow morning.